Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome and happy holidays to you. This is the special meeting of the DeKalb City Council, December 18, 2018. Prior to the roll call this evening, I'd like to ask anyone in the audience who would like to speak to any items on the agenda, or for that matter, any items that are not on the agenda, to kindly get those speaker request forms to our city clerk, Lynn Fazekas, and we will move forward and get you on at the appropriate time. And those speaker request forms are in the back prior to coming into the main council chambers. Okay, having done that, I'm going to ask City Clerk Fazekas to call the roll, please.
Jacobson. Finucane.
Here.
Fagan.
Here.
Noriko. Here. Verbic.
Here.
Favor.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
6 present.
Prior to the agenda this evening, and we perhaps will want to approve the agenda based on the fact that we are going to move one item. We're going to have a request to move one item to another place. I know Lynn Fazekas, who has been doing a great job as our city clerk and has tried to keep me in line with some Robert's Rules of Order, et cetera. Lynn, you had a comment regarding our agenda and the approval of same as a result of this being a special meeting.
Oh, I'm just noting that because it's a special meeting, we would not want to make any additions to the agenda, but moving things around or postponing, that would be fine.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Okay, now I do have a request that we move F5 under on the budget, the ordinance amending the fiscal year December 31 budget and authorizing a declaration of surplus, that we move that item to F, what would be F10. So F6 would become 5, 7 would become 6, and what is printed as F5 would become F10. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are there any other additions, any other movement of items on the agenda? If not, I would ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Alderman Noriko, seconded by Alderman Fagan. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Fagan.
Yes.
Noriko.
Yes.
Verbic.
Yes.
Favor.
Yes.
Finucane.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
6 aye.
Thank you. So moved. Okay, we do have one public hearing tonight, and I will open this public hearing at 5:36 p.m. It's for the proposed body art establishment licensure for Out on a Whim Tattoo. I'm going to ask City Attorney Dean Frieders to speak to this item, please.
Thank you, Mayor. As per our practice at the last City Council meeting, I will defer more extensive comment to the point in time at which the license applications are formally considered for action before the Council. This is the public hearing relating to the existing premises of Out on a Whim in the 100 block of East Lincoln Highway.
Okay.
This is an application by one of the former co-owners to retain ownership and licensure of the property on an ongoing basis.
Okay. For any folks who wish to speak to that item, as you heard Attorney Frieder say, we will be asking for comments on this particular proposal at that time, unless you want to make any preliminary comments as part of the public hearing. Not hearing any, I will close this public hearing at 5:37. Okay, public participation. Bless you, Alderman Noriko. We are now going to go into item number D, public participation, and we would hope that these expressions in public comment would try to restrain yourself to 3 minutes or less, and that the item is something that is not listed on the agenda tonight. So, having said that, I'm going to call on Dave Lehman.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. I'm Dave Lehman. I live at 621 Karen Avenue, and I thank you for this opportunity to speak before the council and the public. I would like to comment on the proposal to change the DeKalb Municipal Code, Chapter 18, Section 18.17, Animals Prohibited, to allow residents and organizations to establish what are termed backyard chicken coops. In weighing the pros and cons of permitting chickens, I find a number of reasons to oppose the proposed change. 1, changing the municipal code to allow residents and organizations to raise backyard chickens would necessitate the city to allocate new funds for code, inspection, and enforcement costs. Also, to devote additional city worker time to respond to any complaints or escaped chickens. Secondly, establishing the presence of chickens in the city will encourage unwanted predators to enter and roam the city, seeking an opportunity to kill the chickens and/or eat their eggs. Farmyard settings entice rodents such as mice and rats who feed on the same food supply as the chickens. Third, and perhaps most importantly, as confirmed by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, there are increased health risks from salmonella and other diseases directly associated with backyard chickens. Introducing an unnecessary health hazard to the city would not follow the guidelines of the city's regulations, which are to provide for the best health, safety, and well-being of its citizens. I have spoken with a number of local farm and rural owners who are experienced in raising chickens. All have strongly advised against allowing city residents to turn their properties into livestock operations. When this proposal comes before the city, please consider all the ramifications and consequences if the municipal code is changed. Thank you for your time and kind attention.
Thank you, David. We have 2 other speakers who have indicated they would like to speak to items not on the agenda for tonight. The first is Jim Mason.
Good evening. No. I'd like to drop this out to you folks, because what I have to say is so complicated.
Thank you.
That I will not be saying much tonight.
Is that a promise?
It's a promise. Thanks, John. You get the order, yes.
Mason, how are you?
This one. I'll call it. Good evening, everybody. I'm Jim Mason, a local businessman. I'm very impressed with the way things are unfolding here. I fully support your new city manager pick. In fact, if I would have known Bill Nicholas was in the mix, I wouldn't have bothered you people. I took so much time to fill out that application, I thought I was going to find a new job. Please throw it away because it's just between us folks. I dropped off my thoughts here today for the alderman. I'm not going to elaborate. It's very complicated, and I will be chatting with you folks in the future. Let's keep up the good work. Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, one other person who'd like to speak to an item not on the agenda, and that's Michael Haji Sheik.
So, council, you know, this is the first time I live in a town that the new city manager is going to be prominently mentioned in the state ethics report. Not just a little bit. You know, paid money over the minimum or the maximum of a particular guy. I think his name's Wally Pfeiffer. But, you know, we at NIU are held to a very high level of ethics, higher probably than the city is actually held to, okay? We have state law covering us. So I think the vetting process ought to take into account really seriously those type of high levels of ethical behavior. And I am kind of disappointed, but not surprised. Because it's always best to go back to a blast to the past. Okay? Have fun.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, moving forward, item E under the consent agenda. Again, for the benefit of our audience, each of these items is read separately, but we enact the approval in one motion. And I'm going to read the consent agenda and then ask for a motion to approve in omnibus form. Number one, approval of City Council minutes. Minutes of the special meeting of City Council of November 16, 2018. B, minutes of the special joint meeting of the City Council and the Finance Advisory Committee of November 20, 2018. Minutes, C, minutes of the special meeting of City Council on December 6, 2018. Number two, Resolution 2018-161, authorizing the city manager to sign agreements for insurance coverage effective January 1, 2019 through December 31, 2019, in the amount of $506,668.78. Number three, Resolution 2018-162, amending Section 1 of Resolution 2018-062, approving a temporary process for interim licensure of food and beverage vending vehicles to extend the effective date to June 30, 2019. And finally, item number 4, Resolution 2018-163, authorizing an amendment to the Barb City Manor FY 2018 Tax Increment Financing TIF Funding Agreement. Those are the items on tonight's consent agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Alderman Favor, seconded by Alderman Norrico. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
7-0.
So moved. Thank you. Item F, items for separate action. Number 1, Resolution 2018-164, approving the appointment of a city manager for the city of DeKalb, Illinois. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Alderman Verbeek, seconded by Alderman Fagan. Any further discussion? Speaking to this item, City Attorney Dean Frieders.
Thank you, Mayor. As the council and public are aware, the city has undergone an extensive selection process to recruit and select a highly qualified candidate to serve as your next permanent city manager. At the conclusion of that process, it's my understanding that the wish of the council is to appoint Mr. Bill Nicholas as the city's next city manager. We have presented this for your consideration tonight as the appointment of Mr. Nicholas, based on requirements to comply with disclosure under the Open Meetings Act. We would be returning on January 14th for a proposed approval of an employment agreement with Mr. Nicholas. This appointment would take effect January 1st, and so on the first day of the new year, Mr. Nicholas would take that position, and Mr. Munch would be restored to either the Assistant City Manager or the Management Analyst position at the direction of Mr. Nicholas. I'm happy to entertain any questions you may have.
Before we have any discussion on this item, if there is any, we do have one person who would like to speak to this item, and that is Dwayne Brown.
Dwayne Brown, 4th Ward. The overtaxed citizens of DeKalb have a deliverer to lead them out of this overtaxation bondage. His name is Bill Nicholas. I know how the Hebrew slaves in ancient Egypt felt when they discovered Moses was there to lead them to the promised land. We have many problems in this city, such as an unbalanced budget, overspending, deteriorating streets and infrastructure, unfunded pension liabilities, a lack of growth, a high poverty rate, and a crime rate, among others. However, Bill Nicholas, with his proven track record, is uniquely qualified to solve these problems. Please look at his accomplishments at the City of Sycamore, Kishwaukee College, and NIU. I hope the council gives him a unanimous vote of approval. I was sad to learn of 2 more restaurants being listed for sale, Eduardo's Mexican Restaurant and the Hillside. We have had no replacements for O'Leary's, Applebee's, or White Castle. I want to thank the Public Works Director, Tim Holdeman, for starting up the leaf collection again, Friday and continuing into this week and beyond if the weather permits. Mother Nature blindsided us with a November blizzard. It just wasn't fair. I have a question. Who scheduled this meeting on the same time as the Boca Raton Bowl was being played? I may be leaving early. Thank you.
And that would be a first, Dwayne. Okay. That's the only person from the public who has indicated they would like to speak to this item. We've had a motion and a second to approve the appointment of Bill Nicholas as city manager. Any further comment? If not, roll call, please.
Verbeek?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
I'm looking.
Bill.
I'm sorry, no.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
6-0.
So move. Would our new city manager stand up, please? Bill Nicholas, thank you. Look forward to working with you, Bill, in the months ahead. Okay, moving right along, item number 2, ordinance number 2018-091, amending Chapter 67, Body Art Establishments, Tattooing, Section 67.03, Qualifications for Body Art Establishment License. This is first reading. Motion, please.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Alderman Verbeek, seconded by Alderman Fanouken. And once again, Dean Frieders will speak to this item.
Thank you, Mayor. As became apparent at the last City Council meeting, we have interest from a number of different businesses to establish or maintain tattoo facilities within the city's central business district. With respect to body art establishments, it is defined specifically as a geographic area bounded by First Street to the west, 7th Street to the east, Locust to the north, and Grove Street to the south. Within that area, under current city code, we're only permitted to have 2 body art establishments. There is presently Proton Tattoo located immediately north of City Hall, and there is also out on a whim in the 100 block of East Lincoln Highway. As we explored at the last meeting, the former partners in Out on a Whim have separated in ownership, and one proposes to remain at the existing facility, one proposes to relocate to the Fargo Theater in the 600 block of East Lincoln Highway. This ordinance, if approved by council, would increase the number of body art establishments permitted within that defined geographic area from 2 to 3, which would mean that both establishments would be eligible to obtain licensure. If the council is inclined to consider approval of this action item tonight, as you may note later on the agenda, we do have consideration of licenses for both facilities. So we would be requesting a waiver of second reading on this to permit both facilities to be eligible for licensure if council is so inclined.
Okay, prior to any council discussion of this, we do have two speakers who have indicated a desire to speak to this item. The first is Melissa Shaw. Melissa Shaw, please. You're not going to speak? Okay, thank you, Melissa. Michael Stiles.
Thank you. Last time we were here, there was a question of sales tax being unpaid and specifically being remitted to a different city, as a matter of fact. All of that has been fixed, and I was requested to come back and let you all know that your past money is on its way and your current money has been paid. In addition, I would also like us to review some of the conversation that was from last week and the naive approach that these very kind and talented people are trying to grow and start a business. I would urge you to not allow an additional license until this body has some additional time to possibly update your rules and regulations about this, because even this kind alderman here, councilman, admitted that this was done some time ago, and it is possible with even the way people think about this now that you should take some time, maybe update the rules, update the cost, and bring it to this particular time frame. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, those are the only two folks who have indicated a desire to speak to this item. I'll open it up for any council discussion. Hearing none, roll call, please.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
7-0.
So moved. Thank you. Motion approved. Would somebody request a waiver of second reading on this?
Motion to waive and approve on second reading. Second.
There's been a motion to approve and waive second reading and approve. That motion made by Alderman Verbic, seconded by Alderman Fanouken. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
7-0.
Motion carried. Thank you very much. Moving right along, item number 3, Resolution 2018-158, approving a body art establishment license for Mindful Tattoo, 625 East Lincoln Highway. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved by Alderman Noriko, seconded by Alderman Favor. Once again, City Attorney Dean Frieders will speak to this item.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the application for a body art establishment license for Mindful Tattoo. Again, one of the former co-owners of Out on a Whim that has left Out on a Whim and seeks to open her own establishment. They're proposed to be located in the Fargo Theater in a currently vacant commercial opening there at 625 East Lincoln Highway. After review of this by all the city's departments, we have a positive recommendation for approval, subject to our customary limitations with respect to the conduct of the tattooing in accordance with state laws and sanitary requirements, that tattooing activities not be visible from the public right-of-way, similar requirements. In this case, they'd also be required to complete any applicable inspections of the finished commercial space prior to initiating their operations. We have gone through all of the conditions precedent contemplated by the city code, and again, we do have a positive recommendation from all of your departments for approval.
Thank you, Dean. We do have a couple of folks who would like to speak to this item. First of all, Melissa Shaw. No? Okay, very good. Michael Stiles, once again.
Thank you. The reason I chose to speak on this particular one is because I believe that any application to obtain one of these new licenses that you just created, unless their application is complete, I do feel that you should deny their application. Specifically, if anyone has not obtained an Illinois Business Tax ID number, you should deny the application for being incomplete. That number confirms that the individual is even allowed to operate a business in the state of Illinois. And in addition, it confirms that sales tax will be remitted in a timely manner, and it really puts the onus on the state of Illinois as opposed to this body for the collection of that particular sales tax and any authority that they have to govern that. Please look at those applications. If that spot is marked not applicable, that is incomplete and wrong. Please deny it. If it's applied for, they should have it. It's very easy to get. It only takes 24 hours and it can be done online. If they don't have it, please deny it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Doherty.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. My name is Mark Doherty. Business office here in DeKalb is 125 North First Street. I represent Barbara Duncan, and we appreciate first that the staff and Mr. Frieders took the opportunity to amend the ordinance to allow for the 3 licenses. So I'm going to start there, and we do appreciate that. Second, I believe that the application is complete, despite what you just heard. I have serious disagreements with what Mr. Stiles said today, also what he said last week at this meeting, but I don't want to stop the momentum in a positive direction. The application is complete. It's what's required by the code. Staff has had an opportunity to review it, and as you've heard from Mr. Frieders, has a positive response to the application. And in my last effort, one half step backward, hopefully before we move forward. You have heard things tonight. Just a minute ago, you heard things last week. I hope that, and I trust that the council understands there are at least 2 sides to the story when business relationships don't work out. I don't think that this is the forum or the venue to be disputing what is a private matter between the owners of that out on a whim. For some reason, there are folks that think it is. I respectfully disagree. But thank you again for your consideration, and Ms. Duncan is here if you had any questions directly for her as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Any further discussion now? Roll call.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
7-0.
Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, resolution number 4, Resolution 2018-165, approving a body art establishment license for Out on a Whim Tattoo, 127 East Lincoln Highway. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Alderman Favor, seconded by Alderman Noriko. Once again, Dean Frieders.
That was you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the application for continued licensure for Out on a Whim Tattoo at 127 East Lincoln Highway in their existing body art establishment premises. The applicant is one of the former co-owners who would be the sole owner of the establishment moving forward. As indicated by their accountant, we have confirmed with their attorney that they have filed an amended sales tax return with the state of Illinois, correcting any concerns or issues arising out of past filings. This is an existing establishment. It has been previously inspected and does have a current valid inspection of the premises as established. This application, again, has been reviewed by all city departments, and we have a positive recommendation for approval.
Thank you. Prior to any discussion by City Council, we again have a few folks who would like to speak to this item. Melissa Shaw? Okay, thank you, Melissa. Michael Stiles? Thank you. And Mark Doherty? Okay, very good. Roll call, please. Or, excuse me, any council discussion? Roll call, please.
Fagan.
Yes.
Noriko.
Yes.
Verbic.
Yes.
Favor.
Yes.
Jacobson.
Yes.
Fanouken.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
7-0.
Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, item number 5, if you recall, we moved what is printed on your agenda as item 5. We're moving that to become item 10. So what you see as item 6 becomes item 5. And that is Resolution 2018-166, authorizing a preliminary development incentive agreement for the renovation of the former St. Mary's Hospital at 145 Fisk Avenue to a boutique hotel and associated commercial uses. Motion.
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved by Alderman Fanouken, seconded by Alderman Favor. Speaking to this item is Economic Development Planner Jason Michnick.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Before you, for the first item in regards to our TIF projects that we had discussed at our previous council meeting last week is the renovation of the property at 145 Fisk. As the Mayor mentioned, this is the former St. Mary's Hospital. It has been vacant for a number of years. Earlier this year, we heard from a developer that brought forward a project that proposed the redevelopment of the site into a approximately 40-room boutique hotel with some commercial spaces as well as a wedding venue. At that time, the council discussed the merits of that project, and there was consensus amongst council that they felt that this was the type of project that meets all the intended uses of TIF, we also provided the estimated revenue streams from the property, which included approximately $45,000 to $60,000 in property tax. The property tax bill last year was a little over $4,000, so significant increase in property taxes as well as hotel and motel taxes. The previous estimate that we included when we presented this item was approximately $80,000 a year. That was updated to about $85,000 a year, which was based on the increase in hotel motel tax that is being considered with the FY19 budget. And then additionally, there would be sales tax depending on the types of commercial uses that occupy those spaces. The total project cost is approximately $7.1 million, and the proposed incentive for the project is $2.5 million, which is approximately 35%. And that is a little bit different than what was provided at last week's presentation. We did reduce that to be conservative. This was in an effort to provide a contingency. However, I would note that this is only a preliminary agreement, similar to the other project that will be presented in the Egyptian Theater. Based on where those projects are currently at, there's additional requirements such as zoning that would need to take place. So this is presented in a fashion that it would be a preliminary agreement. We would be returning after the start of the year with a final development agreement. I believe one of the developers is here this evening that can address any questions as well as I can.
Okay, before we do that, Jason, and I appreciate that we do have a number of speakers, including Nick and any others who might like to speak to this. I'd like to make a few comments, and I think these are germane to the conversation tonight. This city is working diligently with other taxing partners to promote transparency and collaboration with regard to TIF. The city intended on participating fully in the TIF discussion meeting yesterday called by the state's attorney, but based on the state's attorney's change in the meeting format, I attended as a listener and not as a participant, because I am a member of the JRB. I was encouraged to hear the interest and the level of interest in TIF, and in particular, the comments of County Board Chairman Mark Petrowski. I understand that discussion of his comments has continued between County Administrator Gary Hansen and our city staff even today. The city has brought forward 4 proposed projects. We're talking about the first one for TIF 2 this evening in an effort to maximize the redevelopment impact of the remaining TIF 2 dollars. Based upon the comments from the county and from our partner taxing districts, I'm inclined to agree that timing is right for some, but not all of these projects. With regard to the hometown project, which we're going to hear about a little bit later, the owner has purchased the adjacent property, has plans and cost estimates prepared, and is ready to very quickly commence renovation of a vacant storefront in our downtown. That, coupled with the relatively small incentive request, which I believe is $150,000, makes me inclined to support the county's suggestion that this project should go forward. With regard to the Egyptian Theater, there is broad consensus, I think, that the theater is an integral part of our community and has a significant return on investment. Again, I'm inclined to agree with the county that this project should go forward and that after years of consideration, the timing is right for that project now. Now, with regard to the 145 Fisk project and the proposed fiber optic network project, believe me, I believe both are excellent projects. They're both excellent projects in their own right, and they can and should be considered by this city council. However, I don't believe that the time is right for these projects right now. And let me elaborate a little bit further. Based on the recommendation of the state's attorney and the request of the other taxing districts, I'll be asking council for consensus to direct staff to initiate work on the selection of an audit firm to prepare a forensic audit of city TIF expenditures in partnership with the state's attorney. I'll request preliminary action in that regard later on this evening. Now, as both the fiber project and the 145 Fisk are within TIF 1, the city can still consider these projects at a future date with the support of the community and our governmental partners. At this time, I'm requesting that the council consider making and approving a motion to postpone consideration of 145 Fisk and later on the fiber optic project to a future date determined by us and our incoming city manager, following initiation and completion of the forensic audit of past TIF expenditures. If that motion is made and passes, I'll then ask for a presentation regarding the Egyptian Theater and hometown. Because this has an impact on multiple agenda items, if a motion to postpone is made and seconded, I'd like to have the public speak on 145 Fisk or the fiber optic project prior to any vote being called to postpone. So, those are my thoughts. Are there any members of the city council who would amend the motion on the 145 Fisk property to postpone that? Alderman Noriko?
Is so moved.
Any second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Alderman Fagan. Now, having said that, I'd like to open it up for further discussion from our partners, our folks in the room, and then we can have a a full discussion on that. So the motion is made to postpone the consideration of the 145 Fisk project.
And just for clarification for our clerk,
Yes.
we would recommend either postponing to a date and time certain or postponing to a future meeting as determined by the mayor based on some of the other contingencies that he talked about. So if it's acceptable to the movement and second, I think our recommendation, because the time frame isn't exactly known, would be a recommendation to postpone to a date and time determined by the mayor.
That's
Yeah.
reasonable.
And believe me,
That's
we want to
acceptable.
get.
Yeah, we do want this brought up.
We want this action, we want to
Absolutely.
take action on this
Yeah.
as soon as possible, so.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes, that modification to the motion is acceptable.
okay. First person, Jim Mitchell. And we have a number of folks who'd like to speak to this item. Please try to stay within the 3 minutes if you can.
Oh, God forbid. I want to make sure I thank everybody that's worked on this project. I came on board with it a few months ago. Jason and Joellen, and thanks for talking to me today, council members. I appreciate that. 26 years we've been waiting. This building's been waiting. It's been empty. 26 years it's been sitting there waiting for a developer to come along. Well, about 6 of them have come along and never got this far. I'm the guy that pretty much represents the owners, and I represent the developers in some respects, but when is the time? We've got this far, we bounce back and forth with it a couple of times. We have the money, we don't have the money, we have the money, we don't have the money. Council does this, and everybody else gets involved with it, and all of a sudden we've got the money again. But now we don't have the money again, or we are going to put it off to a later date. Sometime or other, you got to get, the time has got to be, and 26 years is long enough to wait. You've got a developer, strong developer, you've got a local strong developer in the community that wants to develop it. And without TIF, it's probably not going to happen. So, I want to thank everybody once again, and the staff and whatnot. They've worked their tails off, Dean as well. We've all done our due diligence on this, and I think it's time to vote.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with you, Jim. They've worked awfully hard on this project. Herb Rubin.
May I have an indulgence and be slightly out of order before I do my 3 minutes? Before I speak, I'd like to congratulate Bill Nicholas on his position and thank him for taking it. Okay. I'll speak okay. For 2 separate reasons, I suggest the council defer action on all 4 TIF proposals. The first concern is the failure to properly evaluate TIF proposals. The second is that going ahead without appropriate procedural safeguards risks further erosion of citizen trust in government. In a series of emails to council, which all of you have received, I have expressed technical concerns with the TIF project proposals. To summarize, 1, the analysis to predict increases in EVA and return on investment is not really backed by fully vetted data. Secondly, the analyses uniformly leave out the opportunity cost for alternative use of the funds. Third, the city has never produced a report examining the economic value of prior TIFs. Fourth, monitoring of the grant terms and economic impact of existing TIFs has been absent. 5, although the city has worked out a system of proposed controls in an ordinance that, if implemented, would ameliorate many of those concerns, and it's a very good ordinance, the proposed ordinance has been tabled and not applied to the current 4 proposals. I've shared with you more elaborated versions of these things in more extended email. But there's one other issue, a larger issue, that bothers me actually more than the technical concerns. Okay. The concerns that I've given should be sufficient to postpone a decision to a more opportune moment rather than a rush to judgment. Okay. In addition, and the newer one for me, a far more important matter is involved. That is, taking these actions will magnify the negative perceptions of government, especially local government. Unfortunately, recent events in the city have increased the belief of many citizens that government is remote, untrustworthy, and unconcerned. TIF funds have been spent inappropriately on administration, prior TIF funds. We have seen accounting mistakes in the preparation of the city budget causing concerns about past practices. Estimates of the size of the deficit had varied from day to day. Staff turnover has been shocking, as has been the unexpected resignation of an alderperson. Institutional memory is virtually absent. The ongoing kerfuffle, I love that word, the ongoing kerfuffle with the state's attorney brings up questions of deep concern. Failure to coordinate with our overlapping districts has reduced cooperation with these entities. Rather than assuring citizens that government is open, transparent, and of the people, these events increase cynicism and distrust. Passing the current TIF proposals in this rush matter without guarantees to fix what has been broken does little to combat the perception that government is distant from and uncontrollable by the citizens. The resulting increase in negative perceptions of government is more harmful to the local polity than the misdirection of public funds alone. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Herb. Andre Crittenden.
Hi, Andre Crittenden, 5th Ward. Thank you for your time. I think this project is an optimistic one, perhaps a bit overly optimistic. I'm not sure where the information came from to make assumptions about occupancy rate and what types of things would be going into that. I think if this does get postponed and goes forward, that it would be good if that would be communicated to the public before the city votes on it. So what my fear is that it will be a project that sounds wonderful, and then a number of years down the line, it didn't quite turn out the way it was, and maybe some of the commercial and retail aspects of it end up being the same kinds of things that we already have here. And so I hope that the council gives due consideration to this project and think about the TIF projects that have been done in the past, all of them, and how they have turned out, and decide whether it's a good idea to go forward or not. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Andre. Okay, we've heard from the public, we've heard from Jason, you've heard the mayor, and why I feel that moving forward with this particular project, it's not the perhaps the right time, based on a meeting yesterday and based on our conversations in the past. Now I'd like to hear from our council. Alderman Fagan.
I have to agree with you, Mayor. Also, to go a little farther than that is that we need to also bring back the Chapter 37 and bring that to, I believe we tabled that primarily because of new incoming city manager didn't want to tie any hands. And not that we didn't have any direction from staff, but we just thought it'd be best just to push it back a little bit. This whole idea of the hotel, I really like the idea of the hotel. Just going back to this gentleman that was just up here, we're still going to have to vote on it when it does come back. I'm with the mayor on this is not maybe not the time. It still is in TIF 1, and we do have money in TIF 1. I believe over the next 2 years we'll have enough money for this. Just as the, well, we'll get to that later, but I'm in favor of postponing, not table. I don't know which way is the better to pronounce.
Postponing, I think.
Postponing this and bringing it back to another time in the near future.
Thank you. Alderman Nunarico.
I too think that the concept of the hotel has merit. I would want to see some more specific details. My primary reason at this point for agreeing with postponing decision-making on it is, as the mayor alluded to, in the interest of working with all of the taxing bodies together, pursuing the audit. Originally, I frankly had some concerns with that, but I think that there certainly are enough specifics to go forward with that, as well as, again, the taxing bodies working together. And I think that's really critical at this point.
Thank you, Kate. Any further comments? Alderman Jacobson.
I have a bit of a different perspective on it, as I normally do. Again, in looking at what we're being asked to do tonight, we're looking at a preliminary development incentive. We're not making a final decision. The reality is that we have a very tight deadline, which is why we're here tonight, before the TIF closes on December 31st. And approving tonight, again, it doesn't necessarily commit the monies. There's still significant more work to be done. There's plenty of time to have additional conversations, both with those taxing bodies and with the developers, and to vet the projects fully. I'm a bit surprised at the fact that there's some definitions out there that these are sudden projects out of the dark at the last minute. Again, this is a project we've already had a discussion on and had already given our preliminary thumbs up to as an excellent use of TIF, both to cure a blighted building, to generate revenue. Again, if those numbers have to be gone back and refined, so be it. Great, wonderful. Let's take the time to vet it. The reality tonight is if we say yes to the preliminary approval, we give ourselves the time to have that discussion over the next couple months. And saying no, you eliminate the ability, at least to a point, to possibly fund this going forward. And again, I think that would be an unfortunate reality of the conversation. Again, in what we have in front of us tonight is not committing the monies. It's merely proceeding with the development agreement before it will come back to us for approval. And we'll have several months to have that discussion again and discuss things like Chapter 37 and discuss things like TIF 3 and all of those other things in tandem with those efforts to work with our other taxing partners. I reached out personally to a couple of the members of the taxing bodies today, and again, the two that I spoke to made it very clear that they don't feel it's in their purview or their responsibility to direct individual projects. They don't believe that's their responsibility. That's our responsibility as a city council. And again, they too would love to see the numbers. They too would love to see some of the backup and discussion and vetting of these projects. From the preliminary numbers we received on this project, this was the best return on investment project we've seen maybe to date. Again, understanding that it also eliminated blight and took a building that's been vacant for 26 years and put it into productive use. Understanding that when the TIF expires, the TIFs 1 and 2 expire, that this property will be out of the taxing district and likely will not be included in TIF 3 or be able to be included in TIF 3. I believe that in understanding that reality, that it will go directly back to the taxing bodies. It won't be captured in a TIF going forward. I think those are the conversations we should be having with the other taxing bodies. This is an instant return on the investment back to those taxing bodies when it becomes producing. To understand some of the concerns I've heard both here tonight and online, that, what if this project doesn't turn out the way it's supposed to? Again, there's agreements in these TIF agreements when they're finalized that include clawback provisions for the city's money, that if they don't meet those targets, then the owner of record at that point, wherever that payback period is, owes the city the money back. And again, that would have to be a separate discussion, understanding that the TIF would be long closed at that point. Basically, the way I see it at this point, and I had a discussion with Mark about it last night and it explained my perspective, that merely voting yes tonight gives us the time to have those discussions. It doesn't tie our hands. If down the road, in a month or 2 months or 3 months, we decide those projects aren't viable projects or can't get off the ground, at that point, our only option, because they've failed and the TIF is closed, is to declare the money as surplus. So again, the eventuality is that it goes back to surplus if the project can't get off the ground. If that's the eventuality, my theory and my thoughts on it are, let's see where it goes. Let's have those discussions. Let's give us the time to have good discussion, both internally and externally. Or we just say no at this point, really, and hope and try to figure out later, at the detriment of likely other projects that may come forward, if this thing could even be a possibility. I really don't believe in tying our hands at this point.
Thank you, David. Alderman Verbeek.
I agree. The problem I have is I'm unwilling to relinquish that development, development that, I don't know, we talk up here all the time about economic development, and we talk about years and years of discussion, Main Street DeKalb, Renew DeKalb, hundreds of hours of how do we responsibly develop in DeKalb, and now we have an opportunity. I understand the situation of questions of how past TIF monies were used, but again, as I mentioned before, there has been every opportunity over the life of the TIF to review those numbers and make sure that the numbers are strong. I understand that we don't have some of that historical data, but then what was everyone doing agreeing to that data over time? And now we're sitting here with opportunities that, again, we've discussed at length. And our hands are tied because of an opinion that dollars weren't used properly in the past, even though year after year after year, those dollars were approved. There was no question of City of DeKalb behavior, what we did with those dollars, no concerns about projects. Now all of a sudden we're here. And I understand the point of why we're here, that there are concerns by our partners, our taxing body partners, how were these monies used? So while I agree that I want to be a good partner, I just believe that it is the TIF districts that are entitled to that redevelopment. That's the purpose. Redevelop Blight. Provide development opportunities, economic development opportunities. We're doing that with this project. Everything I understand, the developer's ready to go. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is there any delay expected to this project if we proceed and support this? Okay. So I agree, Dave, Alderman Jacobson. Let's be good partners. Let's figure this out. Let's come up with a responsible Chapter 37. Maybe it leads to a new TIF, maybe it doesn't, but at least we follow through with the intent of what our predecessors planned to do with TIF 1 and TIF 2.
Any other thoughts? Alderman Fanouken.
You know, when we were presented with this concept several months ago, I think almost everybody up here thought the concept was a good idea. I certainly would like to see it move forward. I want to agree with my colleagues, Alderman Verbeek and Alderman Jacobson. I know that's rare for us, Dave. But, you know, with the numbers that we've been showing in terms of the financing for this versus the numbers that would be left in TIF 1, the TIF 1 numbers don't add up to as much. And as Dave has said that, you know, if when it comes, push comes to shove here down the road, and the project doesn't come to fruition, and we don't approve the final draft, that money then at that point can go to surplus. You know, if we weren't looking at this hard, fast deadline of December 31st for all this other money to go to surplus, you know, I don't think it'd be such a big issue. But I would be inclined to vote no against postponing it and look forward to having some consideration on the project this evening.
Alderman Favor.
I was very impressed when the project came forward at the June meeting, and I too, every time I drive by the building, you think, I wish somebody would do something. Again, we finally do have someone here that's willing to take on the project. Understanding there's a lot of zoning concerns that need to, we need to walk through that, so it's not a done project. I'm in agreement with my other alderman.
Alderman Norrico.
At the last meeting, we talked about, getting input from the other taxing bodies, allowing time for consideration of Chapter 37. And so we voted to postpone, approval of that, at least to a great extent, because of our desire to work with the other taxing bodies. We've continued to work with those taxing bodies in the intervening weeks. And now there's a proposal or, some stipulations in terms of what would work with them. And we're backing away from that. I, too, would, in the absence of anything else, seriously consider the FIST project. But I think that, we worked in good faith with the taxing bodies. I believe that they worked in good faith with us. And, this is, what was presented, and it doesn't seem reasonable now to say, well, we said we'd work with you, but we don't like this piece. At some point, everybody has to give something.
Thank you. Alderman Fagan.
When was this originally brought up? That came up in front of council. Do you remember?
I believe it was the second meeting in July.
July?
A long time ago.
Yeah. I love the idea. I'm for the idea. I want to see it go. But I'll agree with Alderman Finucane, if not for time on TIF, we wouldn't be discussing it. But nothing's happened since July. We're trying to get along with the other taxing bodies, agreement, figure everything out. We don't have time right now. Alderman Finucane mentioned about not enough money there. What I understand, there's $1.7 million. They're asking for 2.5. We're not that far off to postpone this. What if, if nothing's been done since July, purchase of the building, whatever, will it ever be done? I hope so. I certainly do. I want to see it done. But in the meantime, we have to be diligent on what we decide on. And that's why I'd like to postpone this.
I think those of us who feel that we're going to postpone this are paddling upstream, but let's have some further discussion. Alderman Jacobs.
Again, I think it's important to remain cognizant that I think this project very likely would have moved forward between July and now. The reality is that we have effectively suspended all economic development in the TIF in hopes of coming to the table and working with the taxing bodies in the last 5 or 6 months. And the reality is the stall is at that level. I think several of these projects would have loved to have been in front of us in the summer to get approval and to go ahead working. It's been the council and our staff that have basically put the brakes on these projects to work through some of these discussions. I think the reality, again, even hearing from some of the taxing bodies yesterday at the meeting that I was there with Alderman Fagan and the mayor, I think there is a lot of confusion. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. I think that there is a lot of limited understanding that people that don't typically run in the TIF discussions are being forced to jump into them at this point, whether it's not right this second, but over the last couple months. I think there's some understandings that other people have in saying, well, let's wait for the audit, let's do those things. Again, this is a very firm deadline, and I think it's an unfair characterization to say that approving these projects preliminarily tonight would be an affront to the other taxing bodies. Again, and having the discussion with at least 2 of those JRB board members and their officers today, they made clear that they would like to see the numbers, and I think the public and the other taxing bodies demand to have some discussions about where former TIF monies are going. They demand to have the discussion about an audit. They demand to have a discussion about Chapter 37, rightfully so. But again, I think a lot of these issues are getting convoluted together. While they're loosely related, in reality, none of them are dependent on one another. I think in the spirit of good governance, we should pursue all of those things and have those discussions and give ourselves the opportunity to do so. But in saying that that would somehow, in giving ourselves the opportunity to use development funds for development, when we have already held off on doing that now for 6 months, again, I'm confused at why that definition has somehow taken root. All of the things that are being asked for, I think, can be provided. All of the vetting and the discussion and all those things can be provided by a yes vote today. A no vote isn't exclusive of those things. So, again, I think that a lot more conversation and discussion needs to be had. I do believe that we should see the results of some of our efforts in the past to understand, not necessarily to point fingers in the past, whether it's on our side, which I've done quite often in my last 8 years here, or elsewhere, but to move forward and ensure anything going forward, whether it be these projects, whether it be a TIF 3, whether it be any economic development that we're working with our taxing partners to provide, is done in a correct and responsible manner that benefits the taxpayer, is transparent, honest, and provides return on investment. And again, I don't know if anyone here would disagree with those comments. So again, I'm finding trouble understanding how the definition of these asks outside of the purview of those taxing bodies, and in reality it's 2 that are asking for these asks, albeit the larger ones, but are outside of their purview to direct projects and now have somehow tied the definition of these projects being an affront to them somehow. I think that's an unfair characterization, and I'd like to move forward and see what, if any, merit these projects have.
Can I possibly jump in for a second, Mayor? I think we've been having a number of discussions with our partner taxing districts, and I think to try and explain the context in which this request has arisen. Different taxing districts have different perspectives on the surplus, certainly. I think from the state's attorney's perspective, if he could craft a perfect world, we would be able to do what he had proposed and kind of just put a pin in everything and pause this pending Chapter 37 and audit, all of the things that have been discussed. But he recognizes, as do the other taxing districts, that because of the impending end of TIF 2 and the impending end of the calendar year, that that's not possible. from a taxing district perspective, they may view declaration of the full TIF2 proceeds as surplus as a good thing or a bad thing. They may view individual projects as a good thing or bad thing. I think what they've been trying to find is a compromise that allows the city to move forward with projects that don't have any other identified funding source within the limited amount of time we have within TIF2's remaining days, and get those projects moving forward, to find projects that have a potential alternate funding source. 145 Fisk, as Alderman Fagan alluded to, the city could potentially fund that over 2019 and 2020. The fiber optic project, if that's something the city council is supportive of, is something that could be funded over the remaining several years of TIF 1. It is all in the central business district. I think the effort that the county board chairman and the county administrator have undertaken is trying to find a compromise where they are allowing the city to go forward with projects that allow us to expend some of those TIF 2 funds before the time does run out, but try and find a compromise where the city is doing something demonstrable and objective to show its commitment to the transparency goals and objectives that they've outlined. So these have all become, as you note, wrapped up into a large discussion, and we've had some governmental gridlock over the past couple months as far as how we get past them. And the city has indicated previously that it's not supportive of doing an audit. We had attempted an intergovernmental agreement that fell apart because of the confluence of other events going on in the city at that time. And so we're at a crossroads where the request from the county, the request from some of the other taxing districts, and certainly there exists difference of opinion, but the request that has been publicly made is to consider some of these and to defer the rest of them until after the audit's complete, recognizing there'd be funding available, essentially as a step towards trying to rebuild a sense of trust between the taxing districts that we are committed to a path of working with them on the audit, on increasing our transparency, on right or wrong redressing what are perceived as past transgressions. The approach that the county board chairman took and that Mr. Hansen took today, when we first received the letter from them, they said, you know, we would prefer that you not approve any agreements of any kind until after the audit's done. And we explained that from a legal perspective, you know, if the audit takes a month, or if it takes 6 months, or if it takes a year, we don't know how long it will take, but we can't defer consideration of agreements until after the audit is complete without running afoul of the end of TIF 2. And the response to that was coming up with other ways of addressing their concerns and for the city to demonstrate a commitment while staying in compliance with the law. So it's unfortunate these have all become tied together. I think the proposal that the county has made and the further refinement of that they have engaged in has been intended to try and provide a compromise, try and provide, again, a tangible opportunity for the city to take action that demonstrates a commitment to some of the concerns that have been identified. And there are different ways the city can approach that. Certainly it's the council's decision as to which projects, if any, you wish to support. But we are at the point in time in the year that we're at, and the parties are at the point in this current dispute that they're at. And it is the confluence of all those events that has caused this presentation, this proposal to be made, this request from the county to be made and presented in the format that it was.
We appreciate your comments, Dean, but you don't vote. Compromise, controversy, crossroads. It's obvious that this council does not buy in to what I thought we had coming out of that meeting yesterday. And God, do I respect these guys up here. I really do. I really, genuinely do. And I appreciate your comments tonight. Alderman Verby.
Not being at the meeting yesterday, what was the justification of approving one project over the other? We show perhaps greater return on investment with the Fisk Avenue project, so was there anything mentioned or were there any comments as to why the taxing partners approved Egyptian over the hotel or why Hometown over the fiber infrastructure? Were there any comments or justification?
Your guess is as good as mine. I really think that this was a situation that, we've been going back and forth and writing letters back and forth. And so I really felt that it was a meeting. The Chronicle called it sometimes contentious. Yes, it was. It was sometimes compromise. And I think the statement of Mr. Petrowski made some sense, and I walked out of there good. Now, David, apparently you talked to him last night, and his thought last night to you is a little bit different than what he had explained to me this afternoon. But I have not heard from Mr. Petrowski yet this evening. Any further comments? Alderman
Again, I want to be
Jacobson,
clear
yes.
that his perspective has remained the same. It was me sharing my thoughts with him.
Right.
So
Okay.
I don't want that to get confused, that
Okay.
if there's any information that the other council doesn't have. Again, that's something I don't want to put Mark in that position. I, as I often do, shared my thoughts, and I don't think he really gave me any indication
Right,
whether he
okay.
agreed or not
Okay.
in having the discussion on individual projects. I think the justification with the fiber is pretty clear, that that's a standalone infrastructure
Right.
project, and that there isn't an ROI, and that's why there's some consternation with that one. I don't think anyone has shared, thus far to my knowledge, what their issues are with the Fish Street project. And again, I think it's important to understand that this isn't intended to be an affront to the taxing bodies. This is effectively giving us a pause to have more discussion. And if we can come up again with funding out of TIF 1, if we can be more creative, if we can do those things, the eventuality is that we can have those discussions, agree to those discussions, and the money that we're earmarking tonight is effectively all we're doing, would go back as surplus anyway. So it gives us that pause to extend the hard deadline effectively, to have additional discussion and work with those taxing bodies to understand what their issues are and what the consternation with this project is, to explain the issues of clawbacks, to explain our numbers and why we think that they're valid or invalid, and where we go from there. I think that's the best way to proceed forward to ensure all of the discussions that are necessary for a project of this magnitude are had, and everyone can be working forward together on the same page.
Thank you. I respect that. Alderman Norton.
If I were one of the other taxing bodies, I would wonder why I could believe that we were going to work together, because I thought this past effort, and admittedly, it started, my sense is it started with not good feelings in terms of, frankly, the school district's attorney and some of his statements and so forth. But I think that, there was a point when, okay, this is what's on the table, let's all get together, let's lay it out, let's try to work out something that, again, is a compromise. By the very nature of a compromise, nobody gets everything they want. And so I saw the proposal tonight as the product of that compromise. And so for us to now say, well, we indicated good faith, but we're walking away from that at this point, doesn't make sense to me. And again, if I were one of the other taxing bodies and I were approaching further conversations with the city, I would be increasingly skeptical.
God, I hope you're wrong. As I say, my prayers tonight, I hope and pray that what I think this council is going to do tonight, in terms of this resolution, does not fly in the face of further progress in terms of what we want moving forward. And as we move forward, I hope I'm dead wrong. Nick, I hope I'm at your facility in 2 years. I'm going to be there at the ribbon cutting. And Jim, I hope you buy me a drink in that rooftop bar. Really?
No, you
Yeah, really. But we'll see what transpires.
One final brief comment.
Final comment?
I think that a lot of the discussions have been filtered through attorneys. And I think that's part of the lost in translation here. Again, our attorney and their attorney and their attorney and their attorney have all been posturing on behalf of their clients, because that's what attorneys do. The council is standing up here saying we are not looking to make this an affront. That's the official answer from the body that's making the legislative decision. I would love to meet with the other elected bodies to understand their concerns. Speaking through our attorneys isn't getting us anywhere. We've done it for 6 months. It hasn't been productive. Let's get in a room and have everyone that wants to speak in a properly noticed public meeting that's not a press conference, that's not an attorney discussion, basically putting up our opposing sides and leaving it up for argument. Let's have a real discussion. Let's get into a room with those elected officials to understand their concerns directly, and so that they can understand ours and understand where we're coming from, and that these things can't keep getting lost in transition.
Thank you, David. Any further comment? The motion on the floor is to postpone consideration of Resolution 2018-166, authorizing a preliminary development incentive agreement for the renovation of the former St. Mary's Hospital at 145 Fisk Avenue into a boutique hotel and associated commercial uses. Jason, do you have anything further?
No, Mayor.
Roll call.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
No.
Favor,
No.
Jacobson,
No.
Fanouken,
No.
Fagan,
Yes.
2-0, motion fails.
Motion fails. So should we go back to the original motion to authorize the preliminary development agreement? Who made that motion originally?
That was Alderman Fanouken.
Alderman Fanouken, and who seconded?
Alderman Favor,
Is there any further discussion? Roll call.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Fagan,
No.
Noriko,
No.
Smith,
Yes.
5-0.
Okay, motion passes. Congratulations. Get those spades in the ground now, right? On your agenda item, number 7 is now number 6. Is that correct?
Yes.
Resolution 2018-167, authorizing a tax increment financing incentive for the rehabilitation of the properties located at 241-249 East Lincoln Highway. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Did you move? Motion by Alderman Favor, seconded by Alderman Jacobson. Speaking to this item is Jason Mitchnick.
Thank you, Mayor. The second project before you this evening of the 4, as you mentioned, is the rehabilitation and renovations for the properties that are currently located at 241 and 249. Mr. Tom Schmidt has been managing Hometown Sports Bar and Grill out of that property for several years. Earlier this year, he approached the city with the opportunity to acquire the building that he's currently in. During that time, we were in the process of looking at the creation of TIF 3. So at staff's recommendation, we did effectively tell him to pump the brakes a little bit until we could figure out where that was. Wanted to time that as one of the first projects in TIF 3. Due to the delay, we're bringing it forward this evening, given the circumstances. But this is one of the reasons this project was viable. During the time in between, when Mr. Schmidt first approached us, the property located at 249 became available. Seeing the opportunity to expand his business into that property, he did take advantage and acquire that property as well. So he is the current owner of both properties. Above 241, which is where Hometown currently is, it's vacant. There is no residential units on the second floor currently. So he would be renovating the upstairs and adding a apartment above that building. And then in the second floor of 249, there were 2 units. There was a 2-bedroom and a studio apartment that were essentially uninhabitable. So he would be renovating those as well. The expansion of Hometown Bar into the 249 property would allow Mr. Schmidt to add a stage for live music on the weekends. He would also be doing a roll-up door on the front facade with the facade improvement of 249. One of those things that we've talked about in the past, the idea of trying to create more ambiance in the downtown, cafe-style eating. And he would also be adding a small deck behind the property at 249. There's a little alcove between that building and the alley where he would be able to add a deck for a few tables out there. The expansion of his business would result in an increase in sales tax and restaurant and bar tax. As I mentioned last week, it's difficult for us to provide projections given the sales tax regulations on providing information on a single business. We would, however, if Chapter 37 is eventually approved, include the performance tracking with the council members that are allowed to see that information per the IDOR reciprocal agreement. Additional to the sales tax and restaurant and bar tax, this is another rehabilitation of a historic building in the downtown. So if you look at the projects that have gotten TIF money for facade improvements or comprehensive rehabilitation along Lincoln Highway and our core, we're slowly checking those off as council intends. And it would also be adding and improving existing apartments that are currently uninhabitable, providing again, that population, that daytime and nighttime population that supports businesses in the downtown, as well as the additional amenities such as live music and outdoor seating. And that this time I would entertain any questions that you have about that specific project.
Thank you. Any questions on this particular project? Alderman Jacobson.
Again, this is one we haven't seen all of the numbers on at this point. This is the one of the 3 that is the newest of the bunch. In understanding what the incentive amount is, obviously not without discussing total sales tax, understanding we based other projects on years of pay down, what is the anticipated pay down of the incentive in terms of years?
It's within we've been looking at between that 12 and 16 year time frame, and it falls within that.
Thank you. And actually, sorry. There are clawbacks. There would be clawbacks in the agreement that if it did not, that they'd have to provide that difference back to the city, correct?
I believe looking at other projects that the city has approved in the past year, we haven't been tying anything back to sales tax and property tax performance. It's been maintaining the improvements that are funded by TIF, as well as occupying that building with the existing business or proposed business. So this agreement has been drafted with that same requirement that council has approved in several of the other agreements. It is not tied directly to sales tax performance.
This agreement is drafted as forgiveness over a 10-year period at 10% per year. If the council's interested in changing that to a performance-based model, you certainly could do so based on the actual incremental revenue produced.
And this is a preliminary, or we're approving this tonight? The other ones are listed as preliminaries when this one is authorizing an incentive, correct?
This is This project is significantly further along, so outstanding contingencies on this really relate to obtaining the zoning approval for the proposed outdoor patio, but there are far fewer contingencies in this. So this is viewed as essentially being a final development agreement. So if council is interested in adding contingencies to it or having further review of the pro forma or any other contingencies, we certainly could do that as well.
And would that need to be done through a motion?
An amendment, yes.
Again, I'd like to have that discussion as to whether or not it's performance-based or not. I think that's the best protection of the taxpayers' money at this point. And I think all of our development incentives should be tied to performance. It's the only way to guarantee that there will be a return on investment for the taxpayers via the TIF. And again, these are the discussions that need to be held when approving and vetting projects. So I would then make a motion that we move this to a preliminary development incentive to come back to us at our next meeting and have the discussion of what items we'd like to see modified or changed.
Is that something that we can do a preliminary, would you call it, David?
Preliminary
approval?
Preliminary development incentive agreement.
Alderman Verbeek?
Would that harm the development or developer or owner in any way?
Mr. Schmidt is here this evening. I mean, he's already started to incur project costs. That's why the development agreement has been drafted to provide credit for past incentive toward total project costs. He couldn't be reimbursed for those. It would delay his project a few weeks, but I would defer to him whether or not it would cause substantial harm to the project. I'm not here anymore.
Alderman Faber, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I actually had two comments. One, I think Jason had answered the question to me, but I wanted to, because there's interest in this as well, similar to a performance, is there is some additional contingencies that'll be written into this that if they run into unforeseen costs during the project, there's potential for a little extra contingency as well added to the project.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder. Similar to 211 North First, which we was approved earlier this year, given the nature of the work on working with these historic buildings, if there are unforeseen costs that the owner can come and show and justify, it would allow them the total incentive to increase from 150 up to about 167, which is 10% of the remaining project costs.
And the second comment was, I was going to add to Alderman Jacobson's discussion, one of the thoughts that came across my mind is if the project is a 13 to 15, 16-year payback, do you want to just change the forgiveness period to a 15-year forgiveness period versus a 10-year forgiveness period as an alternative to a performance, but we could discuss performance as well.
If I could comment on that, Mayor.
Yeah, sure.
The reason that staff decided to provide this when looking at this project and whether or not to include it as a performance or similar to the other projects, we don't want to necessarily discriminate towards projects and include a performance requirement just because they're sales tax producing. There are other projects that we've brought forward and council has approved those and said that they have the merit to justify a TIF incentive, and we haven't required a clawback based on performance because the projections isn't necessarily there, and essentially we're just not trying to discriminate against this project or in future projects that would be required to abide by a different standard solely because they are sales tax producing.
Alderman Faber?
So I will agree, with what you're saying is, I agree with that statement that not all projects potentially would have an ROI. I personally think it's a great project as well. I thank the owners for going, purchasing the building, they're developing in our downtown, moving forward even without waiting for the city. I'd like to, if we could, to resolve it tonight instead of having to wait till next year.
There is a motion on the floor to approve the authorization of the incentive for 241, 249 East Lincoln Highway, unless I hear.
Mayor? I believe that Alderman Jacobson suggested a
Yes.
motion to, so that
Right.
would be an amendment to this?
Well, what I was going to do is to see if he wanted to make that a motion, to see if anybody would second that.
There's been no second.
Hmm?
There's been no second.
There's been no second, that's why.
That's correct. However, discussion continued, so there's an implied second.
Oh, I see, okay.
Under city code, seconding, the council had some question about this a couple years ago and amended the city code to reflect that seconding requires actually affirmatively saying, I second a motion, or words to that effect in order to signify it, because there were questions about those provisions under Robert's rules that if you speak to a motion that you may have unintentionally seconded it.
Okay.
Yes, I would agree that whatever's in the city code, if it's different from Robert's rules, yes, we should go with that.
Okay. Alderman Favor?
So my point in speaking to Alderman Jacobson's motion was to offer an alternative versus strictly going with a performance-based, extending the forgiveness period to 15 years. If that's acceptable, then.
Again, I'd like to try to see, I appreciate that we have gone away from that model. I think it was to our peril, tell you the truth, and I've had those issues in some of those approvals, and to say that that idea of clawbacks, when they have proven to work in other projects, is now moot, and we shouldn't go back to guaranteeing an ROI, I think, again, is a very slippery and dangerous slope to go down. I would like to have some more discussion, again, realizing that the holidays are now a week away, the reality that contractors likely aren't going to be working over the next week or so, and that we can get this in just a couple weeks based on the timing of this meeting. Again, absent of the developer telling us it would absolutely derail the project and/or cause it to fail, I don't think a 2 or 2.5 week hold to get those numbers, to understand those numbers, to discuss some strategies on how to make sure this development does meet the requirements of either Chapter 37 or the ROI function, seems that onerous to me.
Yeah, Alderman Noriko.
When would we meet again?
In January.
Oh, right. When, January?
In a couple weeks from now.
But I thought we
14th.
had, I thought this had to be approved.
I'm saying,
In-
my motion was to make it a preliminary
Oh,
development
okay.
incentive, as the other
Okay.
ones listed on the agenda are, to earmark those funds and get it done,
Oh.
and put it
okay.
on the agenda for that further discussion
Oh.
to vet the project.
Okay.
So it simply aligns itself with the other agenda items.
Correct.
Tony, you want to second that?
Sure, I will second that.
We're
I will work with Alderman Jacobson.
We're simply adding the word preliminarily, right? Preliminary development financing initiative. Is that something that you can work with, Jason?
I would defer to Attorney Frieders if that would work, based on the TIF Act.
I think understanding your motion, Alderman Jacobson, it sounds as though you're trying to make it a preliminary subject to further contingencies that council would define at the January 14th meeting.
Correct.
I think that's consistent with the other preliminary development agreements.
So there's a motion on the floor that we change the wording to Resolution 2018-167 to authorizing a tax increment, authorizing a preliminary tax increment financing incentive for the rehabilitation of the properties located at 241, 249 East Lincoln Highway. Does that sound right?
It's more than just a wording change of the title, though. It would be to enter this agreement.
Oh, absolutely.
As a preliminary development incentive
Right.
With the terms here, subject to the contingencies discussed at the next meeting. Is that clear? For the clerk?
Is that something you can live with, Jason?
Is that acceptable?
Okay. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Verbic,
No.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
6 aye.
Okay. Motion passes.
Now we have to go to the original motion as amended.
Okay, so we now go to the original motion as amended. Who made that motion?
Alderman Favor did.
Alderman who?
Alderman Favor,
Alderman Favor, seconded by,
Alderman Jacobson,
any further discussion now? Roll call.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
7 aye.
Motion passes. On your agenda, it's item number 8. Actually, it's item number 7 now, Resolution 2018-168, authorizing a preliminary development incentive agreement for the renovation of the Egyptian Theater, 135 North 2nd Street. Motion.
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved by Alderman Verbic, seconded by Alderman Favor. Speaking to this item, once again, is Jason Mitchnick.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the third item for council's consideration this evening that we discussed at our last meeting. The Egyptian Theater, this is the expansion, which would include renovations to the existing bathrooms and concessions. As it's currently configured, the 1,400-seat theater only has very few stalls in their bathrooms, so when they do have sellout shows, it can be quite uncomfortable for patrons. So the expansion would add to the amenities that serve the public, as well as the concession stands that would allow them to increase their alcohol sales, or sorry, add alcohol sales. Sorry, 1 second. Currently, they're using a caterer or an outside vendor to come in to when they do serve or have bar sales, cash bar sales at their events. During the 2017 and 2018 season, there was a total of 26 events that had a caterer, which grossed about $41,000. There was an additional 75 events that did not include that amenity, which they approximate as another $20,000 or so that they would have had in gross sales. They estimate that with the increased year-round schedule that they could gross about $100,000 in sales of alcohol, which would go into operating. I think over the last couple of years, we've seen a tremendous growth in the programming at the Egyptian, which is thanks to them being able to add professional staff. Increasing their operation budget would continue to support that staff and potentially add others that would be able to continue to market events, increase the number of visitors coming to the downtown, as well as the fundraising efforts that they've been incredibly successful at so far. The total project cost we included in here is $4 million, which we do believe is on the low end. So the $2.5 million incentive percentage would probably be lower than that. So they have been working diligently with Lisa Sharp, who's a local architect, on putting together plans. The estimated cost has increased a little bit in the last couple of weeks to about $4.5 million for the 4,200 square foot expansion, as well as the installation of the air conditioning. We've been discussing this project since I started at the city, and I know that's been going on long before I was here. I think from a public standpoint, this is one of the more well-supported projects that has come in front of council, especially from the public. In the backup this evening, there was quite a few letters of support for this project from downtown business owners, developers, economic development agencies and organizations that the city is partners with. One of the questions that of course, we need to talk about is whether or not there's a return on investment. And as I've said time and time again when talking about this project, it can be difficult to estimate return on investment with secondary spin-off benefits. But as you'll see in those letters of support from the downtown businesses, that they claim that there is an increase in their patrons when there is an event at the Egyptian. So, but based on, as a reminder, based on the current economic impact through the Americans for the Arts prosperity calculator, it would be approximately an increase of $1 million of direct economic impact if they were to be able to add the additional 45 events per year, which would bring about 14,000 more patrons into the theater when they increase to a year-round schedule. I know there's quite a few people here from the Egyptian Theater. I'm going to invite Alex Nerad, who's the executive director, to come up and speak briefly, so I can give anybody else that wants to give their 2 cents on this project a little bit of time. Alex.
Thank you, Jason. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As Jason said, the discussion of air conditioning for the Egyptian Theater has been a very long process. One that started in 1929, in fact, when it first opened its doors. But serious discussions have been underway since 2011 with a tremendous amount of community input, studies, research, and planning over the last number of years. I would like to think that the community that built the Egyptian in 1929 would be proud of how far it has come in the past 89 years. Through tremendous community support, the Egyptian has seen a dramatic increase in programming, resulting in the busiest, most robust seasons in the history of the theater. The decision made here tonight by this council has the potential to be one of the most transformational moments for downtown DeKalb. It is not an exaggeration to say that this project probably has the broadest and most amount of support of any project that has come before council in recent history. As Jason alluded to, over 35 prominent individuals took the time to write letters of support for this project from not only our community, but across the state of Illinois and the United States. Many supporters are here tonight. Can I see a show of hands of who is here in support of the Egyptian Theater? All of this should clearly show how beloved the Egyptian Theater is and what a treasure this community has. How amazing to be named this year by the State of Illinois Office of Tourism as one of 20 architectural treasures in the state of Illinois, and one of only two theaters to make that list. The Egyptian Theater has a proven track record of tremendous programming, broad community support, significant economic and cultural impact, and successful historic preservation. Our entire community should be proud to say we are home to the historic Egyptian Theater. Thank you very much.
Okay. Prior to any council discussion, do you have anything else, Jason, at this point? We have a couple of people, one of those prominent citizens that was mentioned, Rosa Bailly. You'd like to say a few words.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
My name is Rosa Bailly. I am here on behalf of my family, which owns Rosita's and Eduardo's restaurant. They exist within the original TIF district. I am also an Egyptian board member for the last year and 3 months. It's time for 12 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 months. I said it 4 times for every year since the last time I spoke on behalf of the Egyptian pertaining to expansion of air conditioning. That was June of 2015. The subject of air conditioning and making accommodations to bring it up to our current time frame has been going on with this council since 2011. In this date and time of technology, the Egyptian still does not have a basic need of air conditioning and expansion of sufficient restrooms to accommodate 1,400. I accommodate 300 in one of our restaurants, and we have at least 7 bathrooms to code. The Egyptian, more than any other entity in the TIF district, is more than entitled to this TIF expenditure. It is legally eligible. More than anything, it puts DeKalb on the map as a positive venue and landmark in which to visit our community. Isn't that what we all strive for, as community and county? There's no question that sales tax revenue is increased by the Egyptian. As a business, I look to, and I use calendars of events to schedule and to plan for business. And I'll be honest, as I've spoken to some of you, I look at the Egyptian schedule events and plan now, and I look forward to those scheduling of multiple events that are happening in our downtown to bring foot traffic. It's becoming an economic engine. Yes, this gem of an engine can, with your vote, to vote yes and make it happen. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rosa. Is Gavin Wilson here? Yeah, Gavin. Yeah, hi.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks for letting us speak tonight. I feel like I'm qualified to speak on this. I've been in DeKalb for 30-ish years, 36 years. I've worked at the Hillside almost the entire time I was there, most of it as an owner. I did a show for 10 years for the Egyptian as a fundraiser to raise money because everybody knew that it was a good cause to raise money for the theater. I've also sat in the restaurant, looked out the window, and seen when there's a show next door and seen the incredible surge. In fact, one night this year, because of the incredible schedule, I remember asking my wife Mary if she'd like to go out to dinner, and she said, no, there's a show at the Egyptian. I was like, darn it. I'm half kidding, but because any night there's a show there, it's just crazy. So my hat's off to Alex and whatever you guys did. It's just amazing. The whole town just swells up, or the downtown, let's say. Let's not get carried away. I also have performed at the Egyptian 7 months of the year, and I think having won the chance to do it 12 months, I can tell you categorically there's no question that the Egyptian's going to make up that money by being open for that incredible schedule that they pulled off to bring in more money. So definitely a good time to do it. And may I just say, Bill, if I can be out of order, is that the correct way to say it? That I think I know what the Screaming Girls in America felt like when the Beatles came for the first time to this country, since we're using incredible analogies. It's good to have you back. And thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Gavin. Okay, those are the two folks who would like to speak to this, in addition to Alex, of course. Any further discussion? We have a motion on the floor to approve this resolution. Roll call.
Jacobson.
Yes.
Fanouken.
Yes.
Fagan.
Yes.
Noriko.
Yes.
Verbic.
Yes.
Favor.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
7-0.
Motion passes. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, on your agenda, it's item number 9. We've changed it now to item number 8, Resolution 2018-169, authorizing the design and construction of a fiber optic network system and related public safety camera system for the Central Business District. As you recall, I had originally called for a motion to postpone this. However, given the fact that we did not have success with that last time, I will ask for a motion to approve this as printed.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Alderman Fanouken, seconded by Alderman Verbic, and Jason Mitchnick once again.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm just going to introduce this item very briefly. The way that this has been drafted, due to the fact that this is a city project and doesn't require a contractual agreement, the resolution, as it's drafted, would approve the project and designate the funds pending the city going out for bid. And then at this point, I'd just like to turn it over to Mark Thorson to explain the project in a little bit more detail.
Good evening. This project's been talked about quite often since I came on board. And the object was to be able to provide for the foundation for a smart city. And slowly, piece by piece, we've been looking at ways to be able to do this, understanding that the resource challenges that we encounter. So this project would not only replace existing fiber optic cable that we've run into, we've experienced issues with over the past winter, but this would also expand that connectivity throughout the central business district, as outlined on the map and in your attachment. In addition to that, there will be this also contemplates 6 access points to replace some of the existing access points that are there, to be able to connect them to that fiber, and also add an additional access point where we currently have no infrastructure over near 5th Street and Lincoln Highway. In addition to that, this also contemplates public safety camera locations throughout that downtown business district. The goal of this initial project is to be able to provide that infrastructure to then be able to provide those cameras in the areas that police identify as areas that they would like to surveil. Please note that these are proposed locations for all of this, and that can change given engineering recommendations and other input. So that's essentially the project. So I would be happy to entertain any questions you might have.
We like short, essential
Yes.
comments, Mark, you know. Any discussion now of this? Alderman Favor.
You're going to pick Noriko. I said, usually he picks Noriko.
Don't fight over it.
So this is one, I've sent you some questions. I've spoken to some other people in the IT field. I was given a proposal of $40 per camera per month, blanketing the downtown with 25 cameras using existing infrastructure and not having to create and put in our own infrastructure, being about $1,000 per month. And this project at $400,000 to $500,000, there's a lot of months we could run those cameras and have instant access without having to build, maintain, and staff our own IT solution. So I think there's better alternatives. I threw out 5G coming in a few years. That may not be the solution. I don't know. I mean, there's technological advances. I don't want to, again, invest so much money into an infrastructure project where there might be alternatives that bridge us to the next technology. And you had already answered my question. There is fiber optic already in downtown, but you feel there might be some limited bandwidth with what's available. I believe that was correct.
Yes, so, yes, I apologize. I did want to address some of the topics that you had brought up. We chose the cameras for this project specifically because of the investment that the city has already made into a specific digital video recording environment. Mm-hmm. So those cameras are designed to work with that environment. To switch from that or to deviate and add a new system, I would have to discuss that with the police department and make sure, because ultimately there's a surveillance aspect of this that needs to be there, and we have to be cognizant of that. As far as 5G goes, I'm always open to all sorts of opportunities. Fiber optic always gives the best product right now. We don't really have a technology that's faster than light at this point, so we feel comfortable in asking for this, knowing that 5G is possibly available. We don't know what the rollout of 5G is going to be in terms of the areas that the private carriers would target first. In addition to that, we've experimented with 4G LTE in areas, and we've run into areas, and it's not just a city of DeKalb thing. I talk to my colleagues across the country, and they tell us the same thing. Even as good as video compression gets at this point, we still run into problems because the carriers tell us that we have unlimited bandwidth. We really don't have unlimited bandwidth. We run into the same problems that consumers do, where we hit a certain point in bandwidth and then everything gets throttled down. And then at that point, the camera becomes unusable unless we physically go out there and swap the SIMs. I've also seen products that have advertised solid state storage on the devices, which is also an opportunity. In other words, the camera stores directly onto the device. Access and retrieval becomes one of our concerns at that point as well. So we've been trying to take an open look at some of these. We're certainly not discounting anything that can be recommended to make improvements on this. In addition to that, I also wanted to address the maintenance aspect of this. This is anticipated to be a public and private partnership throughout. It's costed out as though the city bears the entire burden of the project. We are looking at potential agreements, if council approves us to move forward, with public agencies and private agencies that might benefit from this as well, in order to offset costs that they would have to incur by sharing that with us. So there is some opportunities there as well that we can use as leverage in this to drive the cost down and be able to accomplish the goals that we're looking for. And as part of those agreements, nothing is off the table. Maintenance, long-term maintenance of these can also be worked into that agreement as well. So that is something that we're cognizant of. We understand that that is a concern, and we want to be able to address that, but we want to take the appropriate steps at the appropriate time. So that's why we're looking for council's direction on this.
Alderman Noriko.
Aware of the public's concerns regarding spending TIF dollars on infrastructure, and my understanding of how TIF dollars are to be utilized. I have concerns with this project in terms of the infrastructure aspect. I see value in having the cameras addressing some public safety concerns and perceptions. But again, I'm concerned about infrastructure. So I will vote no in terms of this, but if it's, we look at it again and it's structured differently, again, I think it's worth looking at, but not under this umbrella.
Thank you. Alderman Fagan.
I'm all for the cameras downtown, safety concerns. I know that's been brought to my attention before through individuals in the community. My only problem is it really looks like something that's been thrown against the wall and see if it sticks. Before we do anything, we better go out for bids on something like this. We've got some difference of opinion on money here and what we can do and what is being proposed here. I think we're rushing to push this through, and this is still TIF 1, right? So we got money in TIF 1. It's not as if we don't use it, we'll lose it. But I think we have to do our due diligence with the community and the people's with their tax money before we just go ahead and pass this and have a guesstimate on money.
Alderman Jacobson.
I apologize because I missed the first few minutes. I needed to use the restroom. The purple lines are the proposed connections for fiber, correct? Do you have a map of the existing fiber downtown?
I do. I didn't include that on here, but it essentially runs from City Hall up, it follows the same path as the blue, across the railroad tracks to the northeast corner of 4th and 38. And then it follows that, it actually, it cuts across to the southern part of 38, the southern boulevard, and goes west along 38, past First to Pearl, and then it actually follows that same pattern across 38 to Pearl, and then back over to that northeast corner of Carroll and 38. So it does follow a very similar path of the existing fiber. The issues we've run into is the fiber was installed at the time to purely connect City Hall with the police department. At least that's what I'm reading as the intention, reading back in the documentation of that project. It did not contain enough slack for any work to really be done in any of those areas. In addition to that, with a freezing event that we had in the past year, there's actually been broken strands that we've had to turn around and re-splice to be able to get functionality back up. Now, we've actually worked with a partner to be able to provide an emergency offset in case that happens again. And we're also taking preventative measures with the fiber that we have to prevent any further damage. But that's essentially the existing fiber and why part of this is being brought up to replace that and expand it.
And is there any existing private fiber downtown?
Not to this extent, which is part of the reason why this could be an option for a private and public partnership.
I mean, my understanding was at one point, there are a couple different points, there's been some private fiber development downtown, whether it was DFO or TBC. And I know the clinic had fiber lines put in at one point. I don't know whether they were part of this project or where their access or terminus is on those. But again, I'd like to see what that fiber network looks like downtown to see if there's any other opportunities to patch into those private networks otherwise.
The folks that have helped us with this initial proposal, just to be able to provide this to council to help and the public to help understand what's going on, those are the folks that do have fiber in those areas. And I believe one of the reasons, I'm sure they want to be able to help the community, but they also have the opportunity to be able to work with the city, to be able to provide this and be able to expand their own network, in addition to public agencies that could do the same thing. So there's that partnership opportunity that we're looking at as well.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Fanouken,
No.
Fagan,
No.
Noriko,
No.
Verbic,
No.
Favor,
No.
Jacobson.
No.
Motion fails.
Motion fails. Thank you. Would now be the appropriate time to go back to item 5. I said it was going to be number 10. Actually, it would be number 9. That is on the original printed agenda that we have. It's number 5.
I thought as the motion was made, it was to follow the budget item.
Well,
That's why I'm
Mr. Mayor.
asking Jason, but we can move.
Mayor,
Yeah, sure.
it was my understanding that the TIF budget amendment would follow the 4 TIF project discussions.
Right. Is that okay, Bill?
Well, I'm just saying that as we amended the agenda, it was to follow the budget item.
Well, what would you propose we do then? How do we
I guess I would leave
correct
it
that?
up to ask our esteemed legal counsel his opinion.
they're both listed on the agenda. It's not in any way an OMA issue, the order in which you consider them. If the council has a preference to take them in a defined order, you could at any point in time move to change the order they're considered in.
Then I will go with the mayor's suggestion. I just wanted to make sure that
Right.
we
No,
were
I
doing it
appreciate
properly.
that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, you've corrected me correctly many, many times, Bill, so I appreciate that. Okay, so what we're talking about now is, for those in the audience, printed item item number 5, ordinance 2018-092, amending the fiscal year end December 31, 2018, that's FY 2018, budget, and authorizing a declaration of surplus from tax increment financing, TIF District 2. This is first reading. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Alderman Noriko, seconded by Alderman Favor. And once again, speaking to this item, do you have your calculator over there? Is Jason Mitchnick.
Thank you, Mayor. The request to move this item following the TIF projects was so we would have the ability to change any required accounting in this budget amendment, since it does affect the 2018 budget, which ends here at the end of the month. With council voting no on the last project, the fiber project, we would need to amend this ordinance to reflect that change, specifically in the transfer from TIF 2 to the central area TIF. As it had been drafted, it was assumed that all 4 projects would be approved, so this would be reducing that amount of transfer increase from 650,678 to 150,078, which is a reduction of the $500,000 equal to that fiber project. Also included in this budget amendment are reductions to the general fund. We had talked about this several times. The reductions bring the total general fund transfer to $160,000 between the 2 TIF districts. And the remainder of these include updates to where we are currently in the fiscal year, and also changes that are required in order for us to move forward with the minimum surplus distribution out of TIF 2. We would, although you did not approve the $500,000, the minimum surplus, we could transfer the balance of that with any revenues or declared surplus in FY19. So as it's proposed, I would not recommend an increase to the surplus declaration from TIF 2 in FY18. We would take care of that in FY19. In addition to the budget amendment, this does include direction in the declaration of the surplus from FY18 out of TIF 2. This is a budget amendment, so it does require a supermajority vote, and we would be recommending a waiver of second reading this evening.
This requires a majority vote?
2/3 supermajority, which is
2/3 majority vote.
5 out of 7.
Okay, so could you or could someone, for my clarification, I think everybody else up here understands totally on it, but what is the wording, or do we have to put a number in here on the surplus?
The surplus declaration is, I do not recommend changing that. It's the transfer from TIF 2 to the central area TIF.
Okay, so we don't need a budget number, we don't need a dollar number in there?
The amount that would be transferred from TIF 2 to the central area TIF would be $150,078 instead of $650,678. Sorry, $150,678. Can't read my own handwriting.
Okay. Everybody understand that? Any further discussion? Alderman Verbeek?
So motion to amend to the 150,678 amount.
That's a motion to reduce the transfer from TIF 2 to TIF 1 from 650,678 to 150,678. Is that correct, Alderman Verbeek?
Sounds great, thank you. So moved.
Been moved by Alderman Verbeek,
Second.
second by Alderman Favor. Alderman Norrico.
I thought Jason just said the figure was 156.
It's all right, 150,678.
Oh, 150, sorry, I didn't hear correctly. Thank you.
So is this the primary thing that we're voting on, or is this an amendment to this suggestion?
Amendment.
This is an amendment, okay, so that everybody understands that. Anybody, any further comment? Roll call, please.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
7-0.
Motion passes. So now the amendment passes. Now we have to approve the original ordinance as read and as amended. Who made that motion, Lynn?
That was Alderman Noriko,
Okay, and who seconded that?
Alderman Favor,
Any further discussion on this? Roll call.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
7-0.
Okay, now we go to item number 10.
I had requested to waive second reading.
Oh, okay.
Motion to waive second reading and approve.
Second.
It's been moved by Alderman Verbeek, seconded by Alderman Fanouken, that we waive second reading and approve this ordinance. Roll call.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
7-0.
Motion passes. Thank you. Now, number 10, ordinance 2018-090, adopting the annual budget of the City of DeKalb, Illinois for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2019, and ending December 31, 2019, in the amount of $99,065,366, and approving related regulations having financial impact. This is the second reading, if you recall from the original motion that passed a couple of weeks ago. I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Alderman Norrico, seconded by Alderman Fanouken. Any further discussion? Yes, Lynn?
I do have one comment I would like to make.
Yes, please.
Not on the budget per se, but I did feel that I wanted to let the public know. Well, I'll just put it this way. They're expecting some progress on the clerk's office. I'll remind you that there has not been an elected clerk that has finished a term of office since Donna Johnson retired in 2009. I'm the 7th clerk in 7 years. Obviously, that signals a structural issue. I wanted to let you know that I have done some research on some of the internal structure of the budget, also on some of the work that needs to be done. I have ideas, of course, I usually do. However, I only have one half of the equation that's on my side of things. So I just would like for everyone to know that I will be definitely participating as much as possible in budget discussions going on during FY19 to see if we can start that work on repairing the position of the city clerk.
Wonderful, great, thank you, appreciate that. Okay, we do have a motion on the floor, we have a second, and I'd like to ask Ray Munch to speak to this item now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going
Sure.
to present from here tonight to keep some things straight in front of me. If you recall, we had first reading of the fiscal year 2019 annual budget on December 10th. Several motions to amend that were made. So what you have before you tonight is second reading of the FY19 annual budget. The updated budget includes total budgeted expenditures in the amount of $99,065,366. Note that that number increased from first reading, and that is based solely on TIF-related expenditures associated with projects that were heard tonight. So we would be asking you to amend that number this evening based on the approvals that were made on the 3 out of 4 projects that were presented. The general fund expenditures remain unchanged from first reading. Note that revisions were made in the budget as requested via the amendments made by council. So you'll note in the ordinance, we made the amendment as requested to the hiring freeze that would require council authorization on future vacancies created in city staffing for a period of 6 months. We also addressed the issue with the airport fund balance, which was previously shown as a negative in the account balance summary that was zeroed out through general fund transfer. And as requested, we included language in the budget ordinance that would call for a review and consideration of the FY19 budget as early as the first meeting in March of 2019. So those amendments that were requested by council and upon first reading have been included in the revised budget ordinance. There are a few things that need to be addressed this evening. First of all, one minor revision. So I'll call your attention to Section 7 of the budget ordinance, which refers to the amendment to the false fire alarm fee. That section of the ordinance refers to an amendment to City Code Section 9.04. While the language in the ordinance is correct, that needs to be amended to reflect that the actual City Code section that we're amending is Section 5.14.
What page is that?
That is on page 7 of the ordinance itself.
Okay.
Secondarily to that, we would request some amendments to, again, as I stated, the amounts that are TIF related based on the decisions that were made this evening. So the fiber optic project, that amount was included in this most recent version of the budget, so that will need to be removed. In addition, there is a transfer from TIF 2 to TIF 1 of $500,000 that will need to be amended. The other thing that we would ask for in a motion is on the assumption that council is willing to undertake an audit of TIF funds, as has been discussed. We would request to include funding from both TIF 1 and TIF 2 in the amounts of $100,000 each, respective to both TIF funds, for the purposes of conducting that forensic audit. And there would, the resultant supplemental surplus payment from TIF 2 would be in an amount equal to the additional TIF 2 fund balance for FY19 after removing the fiber optic project expense and adding in the $100,000 audit expense. So those would be the amendments that we'd be seeking a motion on this evening to finalize the 2019 annual budget.
Alderman Fagan.
I'll be happy to make that motion.
Thank you.
I just need a little help.
Does that,
I mean,
whatever I need to clarify.
You know, I understand taking 100 out of TIF 1, TIF 2, adjusting the fiber optic. What else was there?
So we need to amend the final surplus amount from TIF 2.
The final surplus amount?
Yeah,
Okay.
to remove the
Yeah.
fiber optic project and to add in the audit expense.
I did that, the 100,000 from each TIF, sure.
Gotcha. And then there would be required a reduction in the transfer from TIF 2 to TIF 1 by $500,000.
And I'll do that also. I'll make that motion.
so you're making an amendment
To the budget.
to the budget, and what does that change that number to? I realize it's only money, but
Yeah. That'll require some work on our part.
don't we have to have a number before we can pass, or can we pass on a?
If the council is directing specific changes to the budget, I think interim city manager Munch had enumerated 5 changes to it. The renumbering of a section, the reduction of TIF 2 expenditure to take out the 500,000 for fiber, including an additional $100,000 in TIF 1 and TIF 2 as a earmarked item for potential audit expense, reducing the TIF 2 transfer to TIF 1 by 500,000, and changing the TIF 2 surplus to add 500,000 from the fiber and take out $100,000 potentially relating to the audit. The general fund numbers wouldn't change from any of those. It's going to change the TIF funding numbers. The council could approve the budget subject to those amendments being made and direct
Okay.
that the budget return back. That is something the council has done in the past.
As
So
long
you're
as
approving the
council is
budget.
comfortable with that, yeah. Alderman Noriko.
You indicated that the money for the audit would come from both TIF 1 and TIF 2. Looking at the discussion with the county, they talked about the money coming from TIF 1. Are the other taxing bodies comfortable with it coming from both?
So, to be clear, if the city council earmarks money from TIF 2 for an audit this evening, if that audit isn't completed for any reason, that money has not been allocated to any project and it would be paid out of surplus. We believe in looking at, if the council is interested in completing an audit of TIF 1 and of TIF 2, the most appropriate way to pay for an audit of TIF 2 would be with TIF 2 funds.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, that makes sense.
that's the only
Okay.
reason we're recommending earmarking funding from
Okay.
both TIFs, so that there'd be a
Okay.
funding source for an audit of both
Both
TIFs, if the
yeah,
council seeks
okay.
to do so.
Okay, that makes sense. I forgot that, yeah, okay.
Second.
Alderman Verbeek.
Second.
Okay, you seconded Pat's motion. Can you repeat that motion for us, please?
It's, I believe Alderman Fagan's motion was to revise Section 7 of the budget to change the reference from 9.04 to Section 5.14, to reduce the budgeted TIF 2 expenditure for the fiber optic project, to eliminate that $500,000 expenditure, to add a expenditure under TIF 1 and under TIF 2, allocating $100,000 to the completion of an audit, to reduce the transfer from TIF 2 to TIF 1 by $500,000, again relating to the fiber project, and to increase the surplus distribution from TIF 2 that is budgeted for FY19, to add in the funding from the fiber project not going forward, and to take out the funding for the audit potentially being completed, so a net effect there of $400,000.
Well done. Well done.
Oh, we got discussion.
Alderman Fanouken.
A question, could all the audit costs come out of TIF 2?
Again, if the city is doing a specific audit of a specific TIF, we would recommend allocating that administrative expense to that TIF, or that
Thank you.
audit expense to that
I
TIF.
just wanted to ask. Thank you,
Yeah.
sir.
So, we have your motion to amend this ordinance, and we have your second, Alderman Verbeek, to amend this ordinance. We've satisfied all of the questions, I think, so far, or have we? Alderman Fanouken.
Just a comment. So here we are at our second meeting in December. We've been working on the budget since, well, Finance Advisory started in January.
Yes, it did.
And a lot of hours, not only by council, by Finance Advisory, but staff. And I think I'd like to go ahead and call the question and move forward into 19.
Okay. Prior to our taking our vote, we have one person in the audience. He threatened to leave, but he's still here, and that is Dwayne Brown, 4th Ward.
Don't tell me the score of the Boca Raton Bowl till I get home.
Okay.
I'll be surprised. Dwayne Brown, the city's budget is the single most important item the city has to do each year. A balanced and fair budget is paramount. We need additional funding for pensions. We need to follow Sycamore's model and fund additional $150,000 for each pension fund. We need to plan for less growth, which the city is currently experiencing. We don't need to increase taxes such as sales tax, hotel motel, self-storage, or property taxes. We need to make DeKalb business friendly. I remember when we lost Kmart and all the surrounding businesses and a strip mall which went to Aurora because the council was too slow to act. We need to update our website and promote businesses. We need a shovel-ready site for any manufacturing plant looking for a location in this area. That was one reason we lost the Toyota Mazda plant. We need to end TIF funds and let businesses develop on their own. I talked to Lisa Freeman and had a discussion about NIU's declining enrollment, among other subjects. She is very concerned about the problem. I'm sure NIU and the city of DeKalb would like to see a solution to this problem. I have said many times in the past, the city is living beyond its means. I still believe that is true. Hopefully with a new city manager, that will no longer be the case. We need to cut expenses. If you tax self-storage and add an amusement tax, it will be the beginning of the end. All loans will be in default, and we will have no other option than to file bankruptcy in the future. I preach pensions. By the year 2040, all pensions have to be funded, 90% funded. Look at the declining pension rate we have now. We're going to leave this for the future generations, and this is unfair. We need to start adding more than the required amount of pensions like Sycamore does. We have to close the gap and fund these pensions at a higher rate. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne. Any further discussion? We have an amended ordinance on the floor. It's been moved and seconded. Roll call.
Verbeek.
Yes.
Favor.
Yes.
Jacobson.
No.
Fanouken.
Yes.
Fagan.
Yes.
Noriko.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
6-0.
Motion passes. That was the amended ordinance, right? Now do we have to pass the original?
The amendment, no.
The original motion. And who made that, Lynn?
That would be Alderman Noriko and seconded by Alderman Fanouken.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Favor.
Yes.
Jacobson.
No.
Fanouken.
Yes.
Fagan.
Yes.
Noriko.
Yes.
Verbeek.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
6-0.
And before we move on to our new item of business, I would like to just let City Manager Bill Nicholas know that a lot of what Bill alluded to over that time period came down to that October, November, December time period, during which we said we need to get our new city manager, whoever that might be, involved in this. So I wanted you to know that, Bill, although I think you had a suspicion that that's where we were going. So appreciate that. Okay, new and unfinished business. I'm going to read the title below in its entirety. Discussion regarding tax increment financing districts and expenditures. And Dean and Ray and whomever else would like to speak to this. Jason, are you going to open this up, or don't fight over it now?
I think we're all about to put our finger on our nose. We presented this as a discussion item for the council based on some of the feedback we've received from other taxing districts with respect to whether council seeks to engage in a discussion regarding how it wishes to proceed with TIFs 1 and TIFs 2, or some of the other considerations that have been raised by the other taxing districts. So we don't have an action item on the agenda tonight to approve an audit, although the council earlier earmarked funding to make that a potential if the council chooses to do so at a later date. If that's something the council is interested in, we could commence work with the state's attorney's office on an appropriate request for qualifications or other selection process, so we could bring back an action item for consideration at a future meeting. I anticipate that, as you had alluded to, Mayor, our incoming city manager will be able to work with many of the other taxing districts with respect to Chapter 37 regulations and some of the other questions that have arisen. So at this point, we were seeking to solicit any feedback you may have with respect to those projects that you'd like us, from an informal consensus basis, to initiate work on that could return as future action items.
Comments? Any comments? Alderman Noriko.
As I mentioned, initially I had questions about the need for the audit. However, recognizing the strength of citizens' concerns on this issue, I think it is appropriate. I look forward to the specifics of that being filled out. At this point, a forensic audit still is somewhat vague to me, and wanting to understand what the parameters of that would be. I would also hope that there are not unrealistic expectations on this audit. Sometimes issues from the past, clearly impact our ability to completely understand what happened. But I know that the city staff will work in good faith with auditors, and just as they do with the current auditors. It's going to be a big job, and that may well impact some other projects, but I know, as I said, that there will be good faith effort put into it.
I will reiterate what I said to Kelsey Redke from the Chronicle and Scott Zach from WLBK yesterday after that meeting that we had over at the county building. The reason that I think we were probably undecided as to whether or not the forensic audit was something that was really needed was the fact that we didn't feel, and perhaps some of us still feels, that we're not going to discover that much new. However, after having heard the other taxing districts yesterday, as I said to our two reporters who are still working diligently back there tonight, that, I'll be the #1 proponent of this audit. And I think it's the right thing to do. And let's hope that not only does it take an inordinate amount of time, but that we're able to do it find out what the findings are and move forward for the betterment of the citizens of not only our partner taxing districts, but for the, overall for the citizens of the city of DeKalb. Any further, yeah, Alderman Fagan.
I too believe that we should have an audit done. I think it should be an audit that's agreed upon with everyone, not just one direction. Unfortunately, the last several months, we've, not to anything that our staff has done, but we've gone without a city manager here for a very long time. And when all this has come up, we try to do as much direction as we can. Unfortunately, we did not have a city manager in place. But with that said, with Bill coming in, I think he's going to lead us in the right direction. And he works so well with other taxing bodies and other elected officials. I think the way the votes went today probably wasn't in the way that other taxing bodies were looking at it. And again, as the mayor said, I hope that they don't take it in any wrong direction that was done.
I want you to pray tonight, too.
I am. Lord knows that I will. But with that said, I'm looking forward to working with the other taxing bodies also.
You know, and speaking to Bill, and again, we're just delighted to have him, but I've already charged our interim city manager, Ray Munch, to work very closely with Bill, and these guys working together over the next several weeks, and prior to Bill officially taking over on the 1st of January, I'm really excited. And Ray, I want to thank you for stepping up and doing a yeoman's job during this period of time. And Bill, I think you're going to find over the next several weeks something maybe you've already discovered, that this guy has a pretty good command of what's happening, and we want you guys to do this so that our transition is as effective and as meaningful as possible. So thank you, gentlemen. So I guess basically there's nothing to vote on other than consensus that what we talked about makes sense. Is that enough, Jason? Is that enough? Do you have enough? Okay. We will not need a recess for executive session, I'm told. And so with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting. Excuse me.
Oh, yes. Because there are actually some executive session meeting minutes.
Oh, yes.
To review, we need to announce that council members can.
Yeah, would you fill us in on that, Glenn and Dean, on the executive session minutes that we discussed?
Right. So we're not presenting them tonight.
Right.
Because we're not going into closed session. However, they are available now through December 6th. And so we wanted to let council know that they can come in and look at them, either with Ruth or me at any time between now and our January 14th meeting, during which we'll be looking for approval.
And we'll have an executive session at that meeting. Also, just for the information of the public, I'm going to do my State of the City meeting, State of the City address on the 14th of January. I know you've been all waiting for that.
Crane. Again.
Okay. Any further information for the good of the cause? If not, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's been moved by Alderman Jacobson, seconded by Alderman Norrico. You guys in tandem again. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.